Or are you among those who set goals and targets with all good intentions and enthusiasm to see them through, be it exercising or better eating habits or even weight loss, a New Year's resolution or whatever the case might be? While for the first few times you were focused, purposeful and even kept on track, then somewhere down the line the initial gusto and enthusiasm totally wanes. You lose the interest, and what you started out with joy actually becomes an unwelcome chore. Well, pay close attention if you fit that bracket, because we're now going to take a closer look at why this invariably happens to many or most of us. We now welcome author Sarah Arnot, who's dug deep into this issue and has written a book on it titled That Further Shore. And Sarah joins us from our studios out in Cape Town. Sarah, a very good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Look, That Further Shore, it's a great title. Tell us what this means and what actually motivated you to write this book.
Good morning. Well, I came across this process a few years ago, five-step process that was about goal setting, but also about, first of all, thinking about what kind of goals you want to set. And I had huge success using it. I achieved my childhood dream within a year, and I thought, wow, there's really something in this. And then I shared it with my clients and my friends. And after a year, I inquired, and I said to them, did you do it? Did it work? Everybody who had followed the process had achieved their goals, but lots of people said, I couldn't do it. I couldn't actually sit down and think about what I wanted. And that made me really curious. So I started researching and studying, why is that? Why do we struggle with this so much? And why is it that this process works? So that's how it all started.
Very interesting, Sarah. Now, tell us, how would you describe the book? Is it a normal self-help book, or you actually find something deeper when you actually pick up the book and read it?
Well, I've heard there's a new way of describing self-help books, which is success books. So we have a new category, and I think of it as a success book. I think perhaps we also find something deeper. I've really tried to dig into, why are we where we are, and do we accept responsibility for where we are? My main work in real life is about leadership, and my favorite quote about leadership comes from Thuli Madonsela, and it's, if we cannot lead others if we cannot lead ourselves, and the hallmark of leadership is responsibility. Now, I love that. I love that. It's a many-layered statement, but I love it because we're responsible for where we are and who we are and why we're here. And the other thing is that the work that we do on leadership, it actually applies to us as individuals, not just as leaders of others, but in our own lives, in how we direct ourselves and what we do, and in the choices and decisions that we make. So that's partly why we struggle with goal setting and with getting what we want, because we're not really prepared to understand leadership and that responsibility of knowing who we are and why we're here.
Absolutely, Sarah. I mean, in your success book then, did you, what research did you use? Did you base it on real life situations and those that are the situations or the challenges that people around you have actually faced and how they've come out of those?
Exactly. In fact, what I did was, first of all, I studied the hard science. I was doing a 2-year MPhil at the University of Stellenbosch, and I really got under the skin of leadership and really looked at what's been studied. So I'll give you an example. The Harvard Business School did what they call a longitudinal study, and I love longitudinal studies because that's when they sit down and they look at a group of people, students doing MBAs at Harvard, and they say, okay, in this case they said, tell us who's written down their goals. Of all of those students, only 3% had actually written down their goals. Some of them had goals, but they hadn't written them down, and the rest of the students hadn't written anything or thought about goals. Then they looked at those people 20 years later, which is why it's called a longitudinal study. And the 3% who'd written down their goals were earning 10 times more than the rest of the students put together. So when you see things like that and you go, that's incredible, and then you go in and you research more and more data on, if you write things down, it starts to make them come true. But of course, giving dry science out there and just telling people about these studies is not as interesting as telling stories. So what I've tried to do is understand the science, but illustrate it with great stories. So it's a very accessible book. It's not a book which you have to plow through. It's much more story-based and kind of fun to read. And then I take you through the step-by-step process in quite a straightforward, simple way. And then I think what's really useful about the book is I talk about why we struggle with getting through with our goals.
Yeah.
So you decide what you want to do, you set some outcomes, which are your goals, then you have to concentrate on the process of how you're going to get there. And that's exactly what you were talking about at the start. You fall by the wayside because you get stuck, or it's too hard, or you can't do it every day. And that's when I give you tools and ideas for overcoming that difficulty so that you actually stick with the process. If you just think about the goals and the big things that you want to achieve in the future, you'll never get into the nitty-gritty of what I have to do every day and slowly build towards the result that I want.
Absolutely. You know, Sarah, when you say that, I was actually, I saw a meme that says, I like asking young children what they want to be when they grow up because I'm still trying to figure out what I want to be myself. So the fact that you only had 3 people who had written down their goals, and these are adults. But I mean, let's talk about something serious here. You have some 25 years of international experience coaching global companies as well as leaders. What has your experience been in terms of working with them, and how have you taken those experiences and also put them forth as ideas in your success book, shall we call it?
That's a great question, because one of the reasons that I really got into the idea of putting this down in a book and actually publishing it is that even when I've met incredibly successful leaders which I've been very fortunate to do here in South Africa and also around the world, my day job, if you like, is advising and assessing and appraising boards and CEOs and
very lucky,
teams in the corporate executive suite. So I'm very fortunate. I get to meet a lot of very successful people. And I get to know them very well. And a lot of people just let life happen to them. They don't have a plan. The people that I've met may be very clever, and they might have been very lucky, and they might have worked extremely hard. They've definitely worked extremely hard. But they didn't do it according to a plan. They haven't necessarily ended up where they are now out of choice, and because they set a roadmap. And they're not all of them are entirely happy with where they are and still want to make changes. So yes, I do draw some of those stories into my book, in many cases using pseudonyms, because some of the work that we do is really very confidential. But the inspiration, if you like, came in some part from people who are so successful and yet aren't necessarily clear of why they're where they are and what they're going to do next.
All right, Sarah, a very quick question because we're running out of time. I just want to know, where can people get more details on your book, and where can they get the book itself?
It's available at the usual outlets. So it's at Exclusive Books. You can get it from Take-A-Lot. You can get it from Loot. You can get it from Amazon. And it's also available directly from the publisher. The publisher is called Knowledge Resources, and you'll find them online. I don't know if you can see it. This is what the book looks like.
Yes, we can see it.
It's called That Further Shore, which is a line from the poet Seamus Heaney, an Irish poet. I'm Irish. And Seamus Heaney wrote a beautiful poem called The Cure at Troy.
All right.
And the line is, believe that further shore is reachable from here.
Sarah, thank you so much for that interview. Thank you so much. That is Miss Sarah Arnot, the author of That Further Shore and managing partner of the Woodburn Mann Leadership Sciences Institute. What you were seeing there